There was a woman whose heart once held a world of dreams, a home filled with laughter, and the tiny footprints of a child she believed would always be there. She remembered the day he disappeared, a bright sun hanging in the sky, and yet inside her chest the light went out forever. She searched every street, every park, every school, calling his name into the wind, hoping somehow it would return to her. She waited at bus stops, at train stations, at the doors of hospitals, praying for a miracle that never came. Neighbors whispered condolences and pity, but she did not hear them. She only heard the empty space, whereas laughter used to live years became decades, and every year she marked on her calendar was a wound etched into her soul. She learned to live in the pauses between memories. She learned to smile when strangers asked about her son, and swallow the tears when no one watched. She carried his favorite jacket with her like a talisman, and when she slept she dreamt of small hands reaching for hers. She traveled across states, following rumors and lost leads, each one opening hope and closing it in the same breath. She befriended other mothers whose children had vanished, and they shared their grief. Like rivers flowing together, she learned to speak their stories in whispers, so the world would not forget the children who had no one but the memory of a mother to keep them alive. She grew older, and her hair turned silver, but the longing in her eyes never faded. She remembered the scent of his hair, the sound of his small voice calling her name. She remembered the feel of his tiny fingers curling around hers, and in those moments she could almost believe he was still there, even if the world said otherwise. Her life became waiting. She walked streets that had changed beyond recognition, and still she searched. She learned that hope is both cruel and necessary. It keeps you alive while tearing at your heart. She became a shadow in her own home, a quiet presence at family gatherings, smiling and nodding, but always listening for that familiar voice that never came. And every night she whispered his name into the darkness until the darkness whispered back nothing. She carried grief as a cloak, and still she went on. She planted flowers in the garden he used to love. She kept his room untouched like a shrine to a life that could have been. And every day she told herself, tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, I will find you. But tomorrow always arrived empty. She walked through streets she had walked 100 times before, but now they were strangers to her eyes, each corner hiding memories she could not escape. She remembered the day he was last at school, the way he waved at her hand, small and fragile, and how she never imagined that wave would be the last. She carried that image in her chest like a secret wound that no one could see. She searched through newspapers, clinging to every small notice of a lost child. She combed through records and photos, hoping for a face that matched hers, and every time she thought she had found him, her heart would leap and then shatter all over again. She learned the rhythm of grief. It became her heartbeat. She learned to eat and sleep with it. She learned to pretend to the world that she was fine, and yet every step she took was measured by absence, every breath haunted by the echo of a small voice that was never hers anymore. She wrote letters to him for years, even when she had no address, even when she knew they would never be read. She wrote to keep the memory alive, to keep the thread of connection unbroken. She imagined him growing taller each year, his face changing, but the warmth in his eyes never leaving the boy she knew still alive somewhere in the world. She went to parks she used to take him to and watched other children play, wishing it could have been him running toward her, laughing. She could not speak to them because the words would have broken her. She learned to sit quietly beside mothers who had lost children, and they shared their silence, because sometimes grief does not need words, it only needs witnesses. The years passed like slow rivers, and she grew older, carrying every second like a stone in her chest. Every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary day marked by the absence of the child she had once held. She walked through rooms that remembered laughter and found only echoes. She touched the toys that had long lost their color and felt the weight of years pressing down on her shoulders. She went to schools to speak about missing children, and her voice trembled because every word reminded her of the voice that had been silenced. She listened to other mothers tell stories of reunion and felt both joy and a hollow ache because she still had none of that. She went to support groups to sit among women who understood the waiting, the searching, the endless hope that both nourished and destroyed, and she found solace in their presence, but no comfort in the absence. She walked streets at night imagining he could appear around any corner, imagining that every stranger passing by could be him, and every time she recognized someone, she felt a surge of joy that was always followed by devastation. She learned to live in the tension between hope and despair. She learned that every memory was a double-edged sword, bringing both comfort and pain. She carried photographs everywhere she could touch them. When the grief became too much, when the silence pressed too hard against her ribs, she never stopped searching. She never stopped hoping, even when the world told her it was useless. She wrote letters to him that she would never send. She whispered prayers into the wind and watched leaves carry them away. She talked to trees and rivers and the stars in the sky as if they could hear her cries, as if they could deliver them to the child she had lost. She celebrated his birthdays alone and mourned every milestone she would never see. She kept his favorite songs in her head and hummed them quietly so the echoes of him could still live in the air. She dreamed of him at night and woke with tears streaming down her face, but never gave up. She planted a tree in the garden every year in his memory, and each year she whispered into the growing branches, "I am waiting, I am here." And she carried that waiting into every moment of her life until the day she could no longer stand at the bus stops waiting, until she could no longer walk the streets searching, until her body gave out. Her spirit remained tethered to hope, even in exhaustion, even in old age, even in silence. And in the last moments of her life, she whispered his name into the void with a voice so small yet so full of love and devotion. And somewhere far away the wind carried that whisper, and the world remembered the love of a mother who had waited for 20 years and had never stopped believing in the child she had lost. Even after decades, the world moved on around her. Streets changed, buildings rose and fell. People she once knew grew older and disappeared, but she remained a constant shadow, walking through time, carrying the absence of a child that never returned. She watched other families laughing and felt both longing and a quiet ache that settled deep inside her chest. She remembered the smell of his hair, the way he used to run to her arms with small legs, carrying a weightless joy that belonged only to a child. And every memory was like a knife turning slowly in her heart. She went to public places hoping to catch a glimpse of him, hoping that some twist of fate would place him in front of her eyes. And every time she saw a boy she thought could be him, her heart leapt and fell as quickly as a bird caught in a storm. She never stopped asking strangers if they had seen him, never stopped searching. Every lead, every rumor, no matter how faint, every letter, no matter how old, she followed them all. She learned to navigate a world that had grown indifferent to pain. She learned to move quietly so that the weight of her grief did not crush those around her. She learned to smile politely when people asked about her life, because she could not speak the truth without it unraveling her entirely. She slept on couches she borrowed from friends. She slept in cars she parked near playgrounds, hoping for glimpses of him. She kept a notebook with every detail she remembered about him, every favorite song, every favorite color, every expression of joy, every laugh she recorded, so that if she ever found him, she would know him immediately. She talked to police and detectives even when years had passed and their files had grown cold. She pleaded with the world to remember him, and sometimes in the quiet moments, she felt as if the universe had forgotten, as if her son had never existed at all. And yet she could not give up. She could not abandon hope, because it was the only thread that tethered her to life. She became a silent observer in her own town, watching children grow, knowing that one of them should have been hers. She celebrated birthdays with cakes she did not eat, sitting alone in kitchens that smelled of memory. She held candlelight vigils in her mind, imagining the faces of those who had disappeared, and whispered their names because the world had forgotten them. But she could not. She remembered every child as if they were her own, and her heart carried both the love and the pain. She became fragile in body but unbreakable in spirit, carrying the story of a lost boy across time and space. She wrote letters she knew would never reach him, and in those letters she poured decades of love and longing and regret and hope. She told him that she never stopped waiting, that she never stopped loving, that the world was cruel, but she believed in him even when she could not see him. She placed photos in frames. She dusted them every day. She touched the places he used to touch. She smelled the fabrics he used to wear. She hummed songs he loved. She imagined conversations that would never happen. She imagined his laughter echoing through the rooms. She imagined his face lighting up when he saw her. She imagined holding him again after all the years she imagined, and yet the imagined could not fill the hollow inside her chest. She became a mother who existed only in the memory of her son. She walked streets that knew her pain. She talked to strangers with the face of a mother who had been waiting forever. And every day she reminded herself that to love is also to endure. She reminded herself that to wait is also to live. She reminded herself that absence does not erase the bond between a mother and her child. She grew older. Every year her hands wrinkled, her hair silvered, her eyesight dimmed, and yet her heart remained a relentless drum of longing. She never let go of the possibility that one day somehow fate would bring him back to her. And until that day she lived in the quiet moments, in the echoes of memory, in the songs she had sung to him when he was small, and in the endless whispering of his name into the air that might one day carry it to him. She never stopped, she never surrendered, she never allowed the world to convince her that her son was gone, because as long as her heart beat, she believed that somewhere far away, he was still her child, and she was still his mother, and in that believing, she found a reason to breathe, to keep going, to survive, to endure, to carry the story of a love that never faded even as decades passed, and the world moved on, and everyone else forgot. She remembered, and she waited, and she loved, and she grieved, and she endured until the last heartbeat of her body became a testament to a love that not even time could erase.